On September 27th, well, before I even do that, open your Bibles to Zechariah, chapter 12. It's the second last book in the Old Testament. Zechariah chapter 12. On September 27th, at the United Nations General Assembly, a useless organization, I believe an evil organization, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel got an opportunity to get up and deliver his speech. You might see seen it in the news what the reaction was. Now, knowing that he was going to speak at a certain time, many members that would attend anyone else's speech decided not to show up. And then there was some that was in attendance, but as soon as he got up to the podium, they started walking out. As you can tell, all the Arab nations, some European nations, Pakistan, in this part of the hemisphere, Brazil, and so forth. It was pretty much an empty chamber. Now, if you got a video of that sequence, we'll play a small portion of it. Go ahead and play it now, so you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm referring to.
I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
I mean, they start walking out when he was announced to come to the pulpit. As you can see, this General Assembly,
Order, please.
for the most part,
Ladies and gentlemen, order.
now, the United States had some representatives there. They didn't walk out.
Order, please.
And a lot of the cheering you hear is from the gallery that you can't see there, that's up in the balcony. And they're just pretty much guests. And they're not part of the assembly. But that's enough. You can come back to me. This happened September 27th, Friday morning, last month. But we were to expect that, because that's part of Bible prophecy. You heard me right. That's part of Bible prophecy when the General Assembly, the United Nations, the General Assembly of the United Nations gathered. Well, some didn't even gather, but the ones that did gather decided in protest, walk out. So pretty much Netanyahu spoke to an empty auditorium. Scattered individuals here and there throughout the auditorium. And as he walked forward toward the podium, like I said, 2/3 of the delegates got up and walked out. Netanyahu was left with an empty auditorium to speak. And let me tell you something right now. Whether anybody else makes these kind of comments that I'm going to make tonight, well, if anybody else does, it'll be a nice surprise, to tell you the truth. Because Christian science fiction concerning the last days and prophecy teaching has taken such a hold, when things do happen, it goes right over their head because they're not looking for it. They're not looking for it. They can't make the connections, the scriptural connections. When you look at a specific Bible prophecy in the book of Zechariah, a book written almost 2,500 years ago, a book also that speaks of the end times, the times that we are living, you're going to find things in there that are prophesied in this book of Zechariah. Go to chapter 12, verse 1. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord. This is God speaking, which stretches forth the heavens, and layeth the foundations of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. A cup of trembling. In the Hebrew, it'd be almost like the people will view Israel as they were poison. As they were poison. A poison that has to be eliminated. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. Now, let's take a closer look at verse 3. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Shall be cut in pieces. Though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Now, certain things we have to look at in this verse that really stands out when you really can put the pieces together, to further prove that we are living in these days, my friend, the days that Zechariah prophesied 2,500 years ago. Verse 3, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. And before that, it says, it shall be cut, all the burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. In the Hebrew, it's really, they shall be injured. They shall be injured. I would hate to be one of those nations that gathered against Israel, because they're going to be injured. There's something else in this verse. Hopefully I brought it with me, because I had a little note that I wrote to myself a few days ago. If you can go to the other room, someone that's listening to me out there, and look for a little 3x5 card. I thought I brought it with me. But it's something that I wanted to point out tonight to you so you can see with your own eyes the point I'm trying to make. Here it is. I knew I left it in the other room. I want you to highlight the words gathered together. Gathered together in verse 3. Now, there's several different words in the Hebrew for gathering or gather. There's one Hebrew word. It's not used here, but it means to gather, to assemble, to gather in a single location. But this ain't the word that's used here. The word that's used here is Asaph in the Hebrew. A-S-A-P. A-S-A-P. And this word, let me just write it down so I'll give you the definition too of it. This word means to gather, in, to bring objects or individuals to a common place. To gather in or to bring in objects or individuals to a common place, or even a common point. But it also carries an infinite emphasis when you're gathering. The emphasis focuses, let's just put focusing on withdrawal or removal. On withdrawal or removal. Now, a lot of people look at this verse in Zechariah chapter 3 and they try to make some connection where all the nations of it in the world are going to come against and fight either at Gog or Magog or Armageddon in this one last battle to defeat Israel. Well, I'm telling you, nah, that's not what it means here. First of all the nations are not coming. Every nation in the world is not coming to Israel to do battle against Israel at the end. All the beastly nations definitely will come against Israel. When I say beastly, I mean the ones that are part of the eighth kingdom, eighth beastly kingdom that we have covered in the Last Day series. But to gather in, to bring objects or individuals to a common place or to a common point, with the emphasis focusing on the withdrawal or removal. Removal of who? Or the withdrawal of who? And that is Israel. Israel. What does that remind you of? The withdrawal of Israel to lands that it now occupies, justifiably, by the way, to a two-state solution. And let me tell you right now, this two-state solution is going to be a problem in the future, because this United Nations General Assembly and the nations that are part of it think that this is the only solution. And this has already been experimented with. And it failed. And I'll show you why in a few moments. But when you look at this General Assembly that just happened, this General Assembly and the nations that are part of it want Israel to either withdraw, and many of them want them removed from the face of the earth, to tell you the truth. Just like the 2,500-year-old prophecy states. But I got some breaking news for them. It's not going to happen. Now, United States delegation at the UN was one of the few that remained in their seats, which I expected that. And I know the news media, and I don't care which side of the aisle you sit, is always pushing that the support for Israel in this country is waning. Now, Israel just got attacked by Iran again. Excuse my throat. And it was a complete failure once more. And it tells me that they're starting to get the message. It's not going to be by the arsenal they have now that's going to defeat Israel, which lays the groundwork for a future war that's coming down the road, the Gog and Magog war, why there's going to have to be troops on the ground. But while that was happening, even though this administration that we have here now in the United States of America seems like they don't want to support Israel very much in the campaign, and they're trying to get them to always continuously to do a ceasefire, that's all optics, my friend. That's all optics. And if you believe the lies of the left or the right concerning what's happening on the ground, I feel for you. They have you hook, line, and sinker. Because while that was happening, because I believe there was going to be a coordinated attack from Iran and from Yemen, what was the United States of America doing? Of course, you don't hear about this in the local news or the national news. U.S. warships and planes struck Yemen. Struck Yemen and halting an imminent attack from happening. Let me just read you some of the information from it. Strikes have reportedly been carried out against multiple targets in Yemen. Word is that strikes were conducted to avert an imminent attack on Israel before it can happen. Another source, Yemen's capital, Sana'a, I guess that's how you say it, stopping a massive Houthi missile attack on Israel. Another article, early this morning, air and naval forces under U.S. Central Command carried out a series of strikes against the Houthi terrorist groups in Yemen with aircraft as well as Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles launched from Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers. Other breaking news. Bits of footage coming out of the strikes, which apparently including everything from missile launch sites, weapons storage facilities, and command and control locations. U.S. officials are confirming these were American strikes on Yemen and was not a retaliation for attacks on U.S. ships last week, but were instead intended to thwart imminent attack on Israel. And it goes on and on. Houthis, military aircraft and warships bombed Houthi strongholds in roughly 5 locations, according to officials. And there were 7 strike hits just alone on the airport, on a major port city, and another area of the city. And also on a Houthi-controlled military base. That was happening at the same time. Now, it sounds like we don't want to do anything in this country to help Israel out. But that's exactly, and I could go on to say that none of these strikes were in retaliation or because of the conflict that we're finding in the Red Seas, where ships have to go around now the Cape of Africa to get to the other side because The danger in the Red Sea area, the Suez Canal area, is so severe now that it's causing tremendous amount of destruction and stoppage from passing through. Vessels can't make it through there now. They're in the state of danger because of these Houthis and what they're trying to accomplish, to put the pressure on the rest of the world so the rest of the world could put the pressure on Israel. Well, the United States pretty much decided to take matters in their own hands, at least try to send a temporary message that it ain't going to work. But you don't hear about that. The left wants to deny it because basically they don't want anything to mess up the election process right now, and they don't want their left loyalists aggravated at them, so they don't go to the election locations and vote for their candidate, Kamala. And the right's taking advantage of that by saying, well, look, they don't really support Israel because they said so and so and so. And I've told you right from the beginning, don't listen to the right, don't listen to the left. They all have their agendas. They all want to get into office of power. They all want to control what's happening. And they will only give you the information that benefits them and highlights the bullet points they're trying to make against the other side. Well, yeah, and I know you go to colleges and you have protests against Israel, and it seems like Israel's support is waning. But you know what? There's been that kind of nonsense going on in colleges all the way. I remember back in the 60s when I was a kid. They're protesting over the Vietnam War. If it wasn't Vietnam War, it was always something else. We had a few years when not too many protests were going on, but that's what college kids do. See, Scripture knows. Satan knows Scripture. Satan knows Bible prophecy. When you read Revelation 12, verse 12, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. He knows Bible prophecy. He knows the time is becoming shorter and shorter for him. He knows the time for Jesus' return is right at the door, and his time is running out. So in his last 100 years especially, the last 80 years, 70 to 80 years, he has ramped up his efforts, letting loose all the evil actions that he can against the Jewish people, to annihilate them. Annihilate them before the actual return of Jesus. Why? Because the scriptures say that a great remnant of Jews will be saved when Jesus returns. You see that in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. And I will pour upon the house of David, and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for this holy son, and shall be in a bitterness for him as one that is bitterness for his firstborn. You go, even Paul wrote about it in Romans chapter 9. Verse 27, Isaiah also cried concerning Israel, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. Satan knows this, and he knows that before the conclusion of time, there's going to be Jews that are saved. There's Jews saved right now, but I'm talking about a bigger portion of them. They're going to be saved. So Satan's doing everything that he can to stop that particular prophecy from happening. Well, he loses. And he's the father of lies. And he's been putting lies in these leaders of these nations' head to generate hatred for the Jews, a worldwide hatred. It's happening even here in America. Because he knows his time's limit. Now, I'm going to read you some history quickly, because I'm going to run out of time. But this two-state solution nonsense, they already had a two-state solution. The Arabs didn't want to keep that part of the bargain. But here's some of the lies. I'm going to read you some of the information from this particular article, which I agree with some of it. And of course, it has Christian science fiction doctrine nonsense in it, so I can't read that part because it's just not right. It's wrong. The Jews are European colonists, occupiers of Palestine. That's false. That's a lie. And the reason I'm reading some of this now, because we have a lot of new people. They haven't had opportunity and the chance to go through the Last Day series. So the ones that have been around for a while, it'll be a good refresher for you too. The truth is, the land was given to the Jews by God 3,500 years ago, and they lived there for 1,500 years until they were forcibly ejected from the land worldwide by the Romans in 135 AD, following their final revolt. During the 2,000 years that followed, their land laid vacant and desolate. The few Arabs who lived there considered themselves to be Syrians, because most of the land was owned by the absentee Syrian landlords. During this long time span, the land was never an independent state with Jerusalem as its capital. In short, there was never a Palestinian state with a Palestinian government, nor was there a Palestinian language or culture. When the Jews returned after World War II, the United Nations recognized their claim to the land and authorized the establishment of their state. That's probably the first and best thing they ever did. Lie number 2, the Jews practiced apartheid against the Palestinians. This is an absolute lie, yet it has turned many people against Israel. The truth is that there is no apartheid in Israel, and there never has been. 2 million Palestinians are citizens of Israel and have all the rights of Jewish citizens. The only apartheid that exists in the Middle East is among the Arab nations who expelled all their Jews in 1956 after the Suez War and continue to refuse to allow any Jews to live within their boundaries. Lie number 3, the Jews need to be free. The Jews need to free Gaza. The truth is that Gaza was completely freed in 2005 when Israel forced all Jewish citizens to leave the area. Millions of dollars flowed into Gaza from nations around the world to enable them to build schools, hospitals, streets, and other infrastructure items, like electricity generating plants. The leaders of Hamas immediately started using their land as a missile launching site into Israel. And they spent their international funding on 3 things: weapons, construction of 300 miles of tunnels, and mansions for their leaders in Qatar. The only thing Gaza needs to be is freed of is Hamas. Lie number 4, the Jews are practicing genocide. The truth is that the only thing that Israel seeks to annihilate are the terrorist groups called Hamas and Hezbollah. They have no interest in eradicating the Palestinian people. The real goal of genocide is expressed in the favorite slogan of the anti-Israel protesters, from the river to the sea. This is a veiled call for the annihilation of Israel. Meanwhile, the diplomats of the world, including the United States, are demanding a 2-state solution. The truth here is that there is no solution at all, because you cannot make peace with someone whose goal is to kill you. Benjamin Netanyahu has summed it all up well in his often quoted statement: if the Arabs would disarm, we would have peace. If Israel would disarm, Israel ceased to exist. A forgotten truth. People seem to forget that a Palestinian state already exists. Most Americans are not aware that the Ottoman Empire sided with Germany during World War I, and it was decided that after the war, the empire would be broken up and the province called Palestine would be entrusted to England as a League of Nations mandate, with the goal of leading the area to independence as a state. In November 1917, the British issued the Balfour Declaration, in which they promised to make Palestine a Jewish state. But in 1923, the British suddenly decided to carry the favor of the oil-rich Arab states by giving 2/3 of Palestine to the Arabs. This is all part of the Last Day series, leaving the Jews only a small sliver of land 280 miles long and 80 miles wide. The area given to the Arabs was all the land of Palestine east of the Jordan River. It was named Transjordan. In 1946, when it received its independence, its name was changed to Jordan. Today, Jordan has a population of 11 million, and 60% of those are Palestinian descent. Thus, Jordan consists of 2/3 of the geography of Palestine and a population majority of Palestinians. The point, a Palestinian state already exists, except Jordan don't want them, the ones that are just east of the Jordan River. They don't want the Palestinians that live in the West Bank. They don't want the Palestinians that live in the Golan Heights area. They don't want the Palestinians that live in the Gaza area. Anyway, the article goes on and it talks about the things that did happen after 1948, which you already know about. Revival of the language, the Hebrew language would be revived from the dead, which it was, as prophecy. And 2 different prophets in the Old Testament prophesied. Resurgence of the military. That's Zechariah chapter 12, by the way. Let's go back there right now. And I know I'm going quickly. That's why I encourage you to read through or listen to the messages in the Last Day series. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them. And it shall come to pass in that day will I seek to destroy all the nations that come against Israel. How's Israel going to do that? Well, it's military power, backed by God. So you've seen those things happen. I mean, occupation of Jerusalem, which happened, which Zechariah 8, verses 7 and 8, prophesied. Refocusing of the world politics. What does that mean? The nation of Israel would become the focal point of international balance. And that's what I read to you here in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 2 and 3. Now, what you saw, what I started with those people walking out, and the UN General Assembly as a whole, outside of a few nations, are coming together. They're gathering to bring the nation of Israel to a point where they should withdraw, or if they won't, to be removed. That was prophesied by Zechariah. What you saw in that General Assembly was one of the ways that was prophesied, what was prophesied, carried out in our day and age in 2024. A world that is against Israel, that has believed the father of lies. Now, one other thing I want to touch on is you see a lot of more people now looking into the Psalm 83 war. And of course there's some that say Psalm 83 is not a prophetic psalm. It's just a prayer in its nature. And some believe Psalm 83 was already fulfilled. No, it wasn't. I gave you the reasons why in the Last Day series. Find the videos or read 9, 10, and 11 in the volumes. It wasn't fulfilled in the past because, as you probably remember, for those who listened to me the first time around or read the books already, Damascus has not ceased from being a city. And of course it's prophetic. And how do I know that? Because when you look at this, not just as a prayer, but something more. It's a prayer to invoke judgment on its enemies. Whose enemies? Israel's enemies. And the reason why it's prophetic, because we find it even in Matthew 13. Go there real quick if you want to. Matthew chapter 13 talks about a prophet. Verse 35. Talks about parables explained here. I'll start with verse 34. All these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them. And then you go to verse 35. There's some key words in here. That it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. What prophet? What is this referring to? Who's it referring to? That it might be fulfilled with what was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundations of the world. Well, you find that particular wording in one other place in Scripture, and that is Psalms. Psalm 78. Verse 2. And this is a psalm by Asaph. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old. Of old. I will open my mouth in parables in Matthew 13:35. I will utter things which have been kept secret. In Psalm 78, verse 2, I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old. There's your connection of who that prophet is. And it's Asaph. Asaph was a prophet. And guess who wrote Psalm 83? A song or a psalm of Asaph. You can call it a prayer if you want, but it's a lot more than just a prayer. It is also a prophecy. A prophecy. And it is connected, by the way, this prophecy. And the reason why it hasn't happened yet is because Damascus, like I said, is still existing today. It's not ceased from being a city. It's one of the oldest cities in the world. It's been around for 5,000 years. And it exists even today. Now, when you look at Psalm 17, well, in Psalm 83, in verses 9 through 18, you have specific actions against Israel's enemies need to happen. And then it's a request that's being made, but also a prophecy that's being made that's part of a request. And you really don't see the answer because the answer hasn't happened yet. But when you go to Isaiah chapter 17, you really do get an answer. And this is where you got to connect the dots. Because now we're reading about in Psalm 17 concerning the burden of Damascus. You go to verse 3, and I'm going quickly here. I mean, not verse 3, verse 13. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and they shall be chased in the chase of the mountains before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. We get God's response. Let me read you another translation. But though they thunder like breakers on a beach, God will silence them, and they will run away. They will flee like chaff scattered by the wind, like the tumbleweed whirling before a stone. Now, if you look at two different words here, Because I want you to go back to Psalm 83 real quick. I'm running out of time. It frustrates me. But you see some connections here. Psalm 83, verse 13, it says, "Oh my God, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind." And then you go to Psalm 17:13. What does it say? "Like a rolling thing before, shall be chased as a chaff of the mouth before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind." These two passages describe the same event that's going to take place. One is the prayer prophecy, one is the answer. Both use the same words for tumbleweed and wind, and also chaff. Might have different translation meanings for chaff, but both words have the same meaning. So it's reasonable to conclude that this is describing, these verses describing the same event, Psalm 83:13, and also the response in Isaiah 17:13, God's response to that prayer prophecy. So if both passages describe the same event, what does Psalm 17 point to? Isaiah 17 prophesies a future devastating event that has not happened yet. A prophecy in Psalm 83 that was given by a prophet. That in the New Testament gospel records, we have a record of that, who that prophet is, if you look back into history and connect the dots. Asaph. This is not just a prayer by Asaph, this was a prophecy. And when you connect it to Isaiah 17, you see the prophecies answer what's going to happen. The city of Damascus will disappear. It will become a heap of ruins. This has not happened yet, my friends. But it's going to happen. And the sooner these things happen, even though war is ugly, war is bloody, war is something that we really don't want to see, but it's going to happen. And as these things happen, we can see that the return of Jesus that much sooner. So that's why, and I'm out of time, you have to prepare. Now I know I went really quick here in a lot of these points, but the main point I wanted to make tonight is you saw prophecy played out in that General Assembly on September 27th, where the nations are gathered against Israel in protest. It's quite obvious. It's not even words any longer. They don't even want to be in the room with Israel any longer. They want Israel gone. And far as Psalm 83, yes, it's prophetic. Call it a prayer if you want, but it's prophetic. It was written by a prophet that we are even told about in Matthew. And when you connect that verse with the verse that you find in Psalm 78 verse 2, the only other place you can find that kind of wording and phrase laid out in those verses. What other conclusion can you make except, yes, it was Asaph that wrote Psalm 83 that also was a prophet prophesying of what was going to happen. And right now, all those countries in Psalm 83 want Israel removed. At the very least, they want the rest of the world to push a two-state solution, which they already had a two-state solution. That was Jordan, or Transjordan originally. But they don't want them either. Because that's their excuse to keep attacking Israel. That's their excuse, and that's the father of lies' excuse to destroy Israel. He knows if Israel is not destroyed, they will turn. There is a revival coming. I keep telling you that. Not the kind of Christian revival you see today, but one with mourning. Understanding eventually what happened 2,000 years ago. And they will have a true change of mind. So I keep my eye on these little things that are happening. They're not that little, but they don't get much headlines. And nobody's hardly is making any connections of when these things happen, that it's prophetic in nature. And as you see these things happen, I've always said, even though it's destructive, but it's also encouraging in several ways. And one of those ways is seeing God's Word come alive. It was written 2,500 years ago. You could see it on the television screen. It happening as the nations walk out and don't want to even hear the Prime Minister of Israel's speech. Many of them didn't show up. And the ones that show up only showed up to make the point that they're in protest of Israel and its speaker, and they walked out. Now, it's not by accident that the United States didn't walk out. But that's another subject for another day. I'm out of time. Now, I know we'll quickly through all this stuff that I presented to you tonight, but hopefully you caught the point of seeing prophecy being played out. And yes, Psalm 83 is prophetic. We have the prophetic in Psalm 83, and we have the prophetic answer in Isaiah 17. Two prophets, by the way, delivering the same message. Woe to the nations that come against Israel. Now I want to hear from you. Play a song.